Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Network Management Megatrends 2016, Hybrid Cloud, Network Analytics, and the Internet of Things. My name is Raleigh Gould, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker is Seamus McGillicuddy, Senior Analyst at Enterprise Management Associates. Seamus has more than 10 years of experience in the IT industry, primarily as a journalist covering the network infrastructure market. Prior to joining EMA, Seamus was the news director for Tech Target's networking publications. And before I hand things over to Seamus, I did want today's audience to know that we will be concluding today's event by taking your questions. Please feel free to log those anytime using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from Enterprise Management Associates tomorrow that will include the playback as well as some additional resources. So be on the lookout for that email. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Seamus McGillicuddy. Seamus?
Thank you, Raleigh, and thank you everyone else for logging on today to hear about Network Management Megatrends 2016. This is a biannual research project that we do at Enterprise Management Associates. Last report that we published was in 2014. Every couple years we look at some of the major trends that are affecting network management tools and practices, as well as look at some trends in emerging requirements of network management tools in general. This year, as you can see, some of the highlights of the mega trends that we looked at this year are Internet of Things, hybrid clouds, and advanced network analytics. Before I go any further, I'd like to thank the sponsors for this research. We couldn't have done this project without their support and input. Those sponsors are Hewlett Packard Enterprise, InfoSim, Ipswitch, Live Action Networks, Riverbed, Tesla, and Science Logic. So thanks to those companies for signing on with us for this year's research. As far as an agenda goes, we'll start briefly by setting the stage, looking at some of the managed environments that we are looking at in terms of the 150 research respondents that participated in this survey-based research. Then we will examine 5 megatrends highlighted in the full report, which is available for download on our website. Those megatrends are the Internet of Things, hybrid clouds, advanced network analytics, overcrowded network management tool sets, which is something we've been tracking for a while, and increased network management outsourcing. Then we'll conclude by reviewing some emerging network management requirements and challenges, and then offer some wrap-up and have some Q&A if you have any questions for us. Bear in mind, this is a highlights of the full research report, which I believe is between 65 and 70 pages, so I'm not covering all of the data and analysis of that report. These are just some of the highlights. There's a lot more information in the full report. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us after the webinar. As far as the research focus, as I mentioned, the Megatrends biannual report is aimed at recognizing and investigating major shifts in managed environment, network management technologies, and network management organizations. And demographics of this year's research, we talked to, surveyed, that is, 150 North American networking pros and chain of command management executives. 100% of those people who took the survey told us that they were involved in either choosing, implementing, and or using network management tools. People who had no participation in any of those stages of the network management tool lifecycle were discarded from the survey. 3 statistically significant vertical industries emerged in the survey. They include the financial, banking, insurance industry, the software industry, which would include software as a service providers, and retail, wholesale, distribution companies. In terms of organizational size, we had a nice balance of small, medium, and large companies based on a number of global employees. So let's set the stage for the managed environment. Here we asked enterprises, that is research respondents, how many physical networking devices they had in their environments. And you see in this chart, they track pretty close to size of companies. Smaller companies had fewer network devices. Larger companies had very large network numbers of network devices. 10% of large enterprises had more than 10,000 network devices. We also asked them this year to say how many virtual network devices they had, that is virtual switches, virtual routers, virtual firewalls, virtual load balancers. And you see when you go back and forth between the slide on physical network devices and the slide on virtual network devices that smaller companies tend to have fewer virtual network devices than they do physical ones, whereas larger companies are sort of more on the other side of the spectrum, where you see some that have larger numbers of them have pretty high numbers of virtual network devices. You also see, I thought this was interesting, 5% of companies that we classified as small have more than 10,000 virtual network devices. That tells me they're really cloudified, have a lot of virtualization going on, whereas 6% of large companies said they had less than 100 virtual network devices, which tells me they have a lot of legacy infrastructure. In terms of what kind of application traffic these enterprises are seeing, secure web, HTTPS, email collaboration, storage, backup, and restore, the top three, and those three types of traffic were in the top 4 in 2014 when we asked the same question. When we asked this question in 2014, we did not offer as options big data collection, backups, analysis, or Internet of Things and applications and data. You see those two being added as options here. They're both being observed as significant sources of traffic on networks by a majority of the respondents to this research. So those, especially big data, that one cracked the top 4, bumping regular old web HTTP traffic out of the top 4. On the right, you see that we asked enterprises this year what percentage of traffic on their network originates from external cloud applications, whether it be software as a service, infrastructure as a service, etc., backup as a service. Almost 41% of overall network traffic is sourced from the cloud, so we thought that was interesting. So the first megatrend that we will examine here is the Internet of Things. And I would argue that Internet of Things is not a very new concept. It's a new marketing term that's been promulgated by technology companies in the last few years. But you think about industrial companies are adding SCADA networks to their SCADA systems to their IP networks more than a decade ago, and smart cities and smart grid concepts have been around longer than the IoT concept. Healthcare companies have been adding adding medical scanners and drug dispensers and other technologies to their IP networks for years before IoT was an idea. So I'm not surprised to see that 87% of the networking professionals that we surveyed in this project said that they were providing connectivity to IoT initiatives. 47% said they're supporting IoT on the corporate network. 22% said they're actually operating a separate IoT network, and then smaller numbers said they're supporting IoT with a combination of the corporate network and the dedicated IoT network, which is not a surprise because organizations are also implementing more than one IoT initiative. 47% said they had 2, 23% said they had 3, and 15% said they have 4 or more. So it's not surprising that a significant number of them are operating, supporting IoT on a mix of dedicated networks and corporate networks. Another important thing to keep in mind here is that almost half, 46% of networking teams are taking a leading role in planning and implementing all IoT initiatives. A smaller percentage were taking a leading role in implementing some but not others. And then a very, very tiny percent, less than 5%, said that their involvement began only when asked to support IoT after implementation. So it's very clear that the networking team is a partner and a leader in IoT initiatives. Here are the top IoT applications pursued by enterprises. We asked them to identify all that they are doing with IoT, and you see networks and communications sort of rises to the top here. Obviously, it's the network. IoT is a network. A lot of people don't really think of networks and communications when they're thinking about Internet of Things. They're thinking about the other things that are connected to networks. But I think this is indicative of certain enterprises identifying that networking and communications is an opportunity for getting smarter about infrastructure. That might mean that they've identified IoT as an area where they can do more about, for instance, looking at how their networks and infrastructure consume power, what kind of temperatures remote sites are experiencing, for switches and routers that might be sensitive to environmental conditions. Or they might be doing some advanced inventory management and location-based services around things that are connected to the network, like mobile devices, video systems, and things like that. Then some of the other secondary, more popular applications that are being pursued here: security and public safety, logistics and transportation, retail, buildings and facilities. This is all really general. Then you see some of the least popular ones might be a little more vertical specific, like agriculture sits at the bottom, environmental monitoring, which includes forest fire detection and air pollution, pretty much at the bottom, along with municipalities and utilities like smart cities, smart grids. But this gives you a sense of what all these organizations are doing. I think it's really interesting. We asked them what kind of technologies they're implementing in support of IoT, and here you see new security controls is the only one that's being implemented by a majority of enterprises, and then new Internet of Things device management systems is number 2, and followed closely by bandwidth upgrades and new network connectivity, which is no surprise. And then follow that by new IoT performance monitoring and management systems, and you see a third are implementing new IoT network protocols. Here we asked them about IoT networking challenges, and lack of monitoring and lack of security controls are at the top of the list. Limited monitoring of network-connected devices and lack of security controls in connected devices, those pretty much correlate to some of the technology priorities of the previous slide. Also, things like network traffic congestion in the middle of the pack there kind of speaks to the fact that people are adding new connectivity and bandwidth upgrades. You also see 35% said they're challenged by a lack of industry-standard IoT protocols, which is interesting. Since a third said they're adopting IoT protocols in the previous slide, there's definitely an issue here. A lot of the IoT protocols out there today are vendor-driven or driven by consortiums of technology providers. There's not a lot of standardization so far. There's a lot of maturing that needs to happen there. Megatrend number 2 is hybrid cloud. Here we define for the research respondents, hybrid cloud is a cloud computing environment that combines private internal cloud infrastructure with public external cloud infrastructure with connectivity and orchestration across internal and external cloud domains. With that definition in mind, 90% of enterprises said they had specific hybrid cloud deployment plans, which was pretty surprising to me. 35% said they had completed a production hybrid cloud deployment. Another 35% said they're in the process of deploying one, and 20% said they were planning to deploy one into production within 24 months. As far as what technologies they deploy to support hybrid cloud, network virtualization overlays, that's SDN, tops the list. And new network performance monitoring and management software is also being targeted by a majority of these enterprises. Bear in mind, when you ask this question, only of those that have actually got specific plans or have already deployed hybrid cloud. Those who had no plans whatsoever were not asked this question. You see some OpenStack activity here. 32% are implementing commercial OpenStack networking plugins and APIs, and 28% are implementing OpenStack Neutron. And 30% said they're using bare metal white box switching hardware and software, which is extremely surprising to me, although given the fact that there's a significant number of financial companies and software/SaaS providers in this survey, that might explain some of that, but that is pretty high. However, we have seen 3 mainstream network infrastructure providers introduce solutions in that area over the last couple of years, so this might be reflective of that as well. They may be testing white box and bare metal switching right now. Whether it's actually going into production is another issue. Here we asked about hybrid cloud networking challenges, and you see some differences between large and small enterprises. You also see that these challenges are very reflective of real hybrid cloud environments. This isn't people calling something hybrid cloud that isn't. Large companies are definitely struggling with a lack of logical layer 2 connectivity and shared IP ranges between internal and external cloud environments. They're also more likely to suffer from a lack of end-to-end multi-site network visibility and troubleshooting, and also from network latency between internal and external cloud resources. And medium and small companies are definitely struggling with incompatible security domains between cloud environments, whereas small companies are dealing with a lack of monitoring and troubleshooting of interconnections between public and private cloud environments, and also the cloud applications that are not properly architected for hybrid cloud networks. So there's plenty more data on hybrid cloud in the research itself, but now megatrends number 3, advanced network analytics. What is that? Advanced network analytics in the context of this research involves the use of various analytical techniques on multiple types of data extracted from the network infrastructure for the purposes of improved network engineering and operations and better alignment with the business. Kind of like big data analysis, but just limited to the network and scope, and based on that definition, 49% of enterprises in the survey are doing this today, and 40% plan to implement this within 12 months. 73% of these initiatives are led by the network infrastructure team, just 17% are led by a separate analytics team. Here's a list of the top network infrastructure data types that are included in network analytics initiatives. Network flows and network security data, the most important sources. You see 49% for flows, 48% using network security data. Then secondary sources are interpreted packet flow, such as packet metadata, although large companies consider that much more important. You see 47% of large companies are using it. Log data is another secondary source of data in these projects, although small companies are leaning on it more heavily. And then time series monitoring data is another secondary source of data for these projects. In terms of what they're doing with advanced analytics of the network monitoring data, no surprise, network security monitoring tops the list, given the fact that network flows, which is very useful in network security monitoring, and network security data are the two top data types that are included in these projects. It's no surprise that network security monitoring tops the list. Network optimization is number 2, and I'm happy to see business process optimization number 3. That means that 27% of the enterprises represented in this research are optimizing business processes by applying advanced analytics to network data. I think that's really promising. I'd like to see that number go up over time. You see a lot of other interesting things going on with predictive network analysis. Some things that are much less mainstream here are change impact analytics, network simulation, and if-then capacity planning and optimization. But there's a lot of interesting use cases that are being exploited here. In terms of challenges to success with advanced network analytics, we see the biggest hurdle, 30% struggle with process and political issues. That means they're struggling to share data effectively among different stakeholders, and this is definitely a bigger issue for large enterprises. 37% of them are dealing with it. So that's an issue where people need to demonstrate the value of sharing this data across different areas of the infrastructure team and the business to make sure that they can clear out those process and political issues through demonstrated value. You see 3 big secondary issues here. 25% say network capacity is strained by a collection and backup of network data. It's no surprise that's something that big data projects from the analytics teams are also doing to the infrastructure. 24% are struggling with normalizing heterogeneous network data types. That calls for a need for some analytical tools that are customized or modified to support network analytics projects in general. And then number 4 here, 23% say their network monitoring vendors do not allow them to export data for third-party analysis. And that's a bigger problem from larger companies, 35%. This is an issue where you may run in, if you yourself are pursuing a network analytics project, you might run into some vendors who just aren't playing ball. You might want to ask them to offer APIs or specific integrations with other tools that you value in such projects to get those roadblocks out of the way. Megatrend number 4. The impact of an overcrowded network management tool set. Here you see we asked enterprise network management professionals to tell us how many network monitoring and troubleshooting tools they use actively. This doesn't include shelfware. In 2014, the bell curve kind of centered on 3 to 10 tools in active use. Now it looks more like 4 to 15 tools. So we've seen a little creep upwards here. People are using 4 to 15 tools as a network management team to monitor and troubleshoot their networks. On the surface, that doesn't look very efficient, and these numbers bear that out. Now, we asked enterprise network management professionals to tell us what percentage of network problems are experienced and reported by end users before the network operations team is aware of them. That means network problems are affecting end users before network operations is on top of it. And 40.07% of all network problems are experienced by those end users and reported by those end users first. That number is almost identical to what we found in 2014, so we aren't seeing a lot of change there. The goal would be to get that number down. We also find that, as you see here, the size of a network monitoring toolkit influences this statistic tremendously. Those who have just 1 to 3 network monitoring and troubleshooting tools are catching more than 70% of problems before end users feel them, as opposed to those organizations that have 11 or more tools, they're catching less than half. That's a huge gap. That's indicative of an overcrowded management tool set causing or degrading the effectiveness of network operations. Here we see another way of looking at that. We asked research respondents to tell us what percentage of time they spend on reactive troubleshooting, proactive problem prevention, and all other tasks and projects. And you see here those in blue, those are the ones that have just 1 to 3 tools in active use. They spend the least amount of time on reactive troubleshooting and the most amount of time on all other tools and projects. That means the most time spent on delivering additional value to the business. Whereas the most crowded tool sets spend the most time on reactive troubleshooting, the least amount of time on proactive problem prevention. Those in the middle with 4 to 10 tools, which is the majority of enterprises in the study, or the plurality of them, they're in the middle of the pack in terms of time spent on reactive troubleshooting, but they're, for some reason, more busy with proactive problem prevention and have the least amount of time for all other tools, tasks, and projects, which is an interesting little blip in their data there. It'd be interesting to watch this change over time, see if the ability of network management organizations to get their tools more consolidated will affect overall effectiveness of network operations. Because as you can see here, well, first off, let's talk about stability of networks. 34% of organizations with 11 or more tools in active use, network monitoring tools in active use, experience several network-related outages per day. That's in contrast to the 6% of organizations with just 1 to 3 tools. That's a big difference there. Meanwhile, 18% of organizations with 1 to 3 tools say that they almost never experience a network-related outage, and another 21% experience just an outage just once or twice a year. The correlation here is hard to ignore. It seems to indicate that those with more consolidated management tool sets have stabler networks. And it really supports the idea that you need to consolidate wherever possible, which is why 60% of the organizations who told us they had 11 or more tools in active use were consolidating network management tools wherever possible. Meanwhile, 52% of organizations with 1 to 3 tools and 45% of organizations with 4 to 10 tools said that they had a policy of maintaining the current number of tools in use. So they are aware of the problem, and they're taking steps to deal with the issue. However, as I mentioned earlier, the number of tools in active use seems to have crept up over the last 2 years. We'd really like to see that number go down. Megatrend number 5, network management outsourcing on the rise. The majority of enterprises are outsourcing some aspect of network monitoring and management to a management services provider, 51% to be specific. Large companies are doing it more often at 65%, but small and medium companies are also doing it in significant numbers. This contrasts in 2014 when we asked this question, only 36% said they were doing it. I don't know if that's an aberration or indicative of a trend. We're going to have to ask this question again in a couple of years to see where things are going. Also, 30% of organizations that are outsourcing some part of network monitoring said that they maintain the tools that they used prior to outsourcing whatever function it was in order to oversee MSP activity, which I think is a good strategy. In terms of what's outsourced to MSPs, here are the top 5: 24/7 network health monitoring, remote site monitoring, layer 1 support, that's help desk calls, off-hours network health monitoring, and wireless LAN networking support. All of these were in the top 5 last year, 2 years ago when we asked the same question, except for layer 1 support, help desk calls. That one was near the bottom. It's risen to the top, and that may be one of the reasons why we've seen a little bit of growth or significant growth in network management outsourcing. It seems more companies are outsourcing their help desk calls. Here, I decided to take a look at the effectiveness of network operations when network management functions are outsourced, and you see in that chart, organizations that are outsourcing are spending more time on reactive troubleshooting, slightly less time on proactive problem prevention, and less time on all other tasks and projects, which indicates they may be a little less effective at network operations. Whether that's a symptom of why they decided to outsource, or whether it's a symptom of ineffective network management outsourcing is another question that's going to require us to do some additional research in this area. On the bottom right, you see network problems. As I mentioned earlier, 40% of all network problems roughly are detected by end users first. Here, we're seeing a huge difference in organizations that outsource network management versus those who don't. That's a little worrisome. Finally, emerging network management requirements and challenges. So network operations is more integrated into unified cross-domain operations efforts than it has in the past. Now, just 26% of enterprises said they had a converged cross-domain operations center, which is actually down from what we saw 2 years ago. The rest are either maintaining independent NOCs or have some sort of distributed operations team where infrastructure operators are accessing tools wherever they are. Those who don't have a cross-domain operations center, though, are integrating network monitoring into cross-domain operations consoles. Here we asked, are you integrating network monitoring into cross-domain operations consoles? If we asked that question only of those who didn't have a cross-domain operations center in use. And 49% said they've already done that integration, and 36% said they're going to integrate within 12 months. So even though not only a minority have a cross-domain operations center, those who don't are cognizant of the fact that they need to integrate their network monitoring tools into some sort of cross-domain tooling. In terms of what they're integrating their network management tools with most often, virtual systems management, security monitoring are their top 2, and then followed behind that, application performance management software and systems. Here's a question we asked people for the first time this year. We didn't ask this 2 years ago. We asked them, what are your top challenges in network operations success? And you see lack of end-to-end network visibility, lack of resources, and lack of visibility control into external cloud services are the top 3, followed not too far behind by lack of defined processes, which indicates that people need to do some more with ITIL and other formal approaches to process defining. And then fourth, fragmented management tool sets, which will harken back to the overcrowded network management tool sets I just went on and on about to exhaustion. It's there near the top or middle of the pack, I guess. Also cross-domain visibility, which is also something I just addressed. So you can see those are challenges that a significant number are facing. In terms of what network management tool vendors get right and wrong, on the left you see the product features of network management tools that add the most value. On the right you see the product features that need the most work. You'll see some repetition there. At the top of both lists is customizable reporting, which leads me to believe that people really value customizable reporting, but they see room for improvement from their vendors. Log file analysis brings the second most value to these enterprises. You see that on the list of the top features that need the most work. There, 24% say they need that improved. You also see top value deliverers, including specific support for virtual server environments, specific support for cloud environments. The fact that so many of these organizations are doing hybrid cloud, so both of those make a lot of sense. And also APIs for integration with other tools makes a lot of sense given all the activity we're seeing around cross-domain tooling. However, specific support for cloud environments is on the list of things that need the most improvement as well. So you're seeing that a lot of network management tool vendors are delivering value, but that value could be improved. So key takeaways of this Megatrends research. Most enterprises have at least one Internet of Things initiative, and the networking team usually takes a leading role on those initiatives. Most enterprises are implementing hybrid clouds, and networking teams are adopting SDN overlays and new network performance management tools to support them. Most enterprises are using or planning to use advanced network analytics, which they leverage to enhance network security monitoring, optimize networks, and business processes. Crowded network management toolkits are degrading operational effectiveness. And more than half of enterprises are outsourcing some network management functions, but this outsourcing appears that it might be degrading network operations effectiveness. And finally, network managers continue to need improved customizable reporting and log file analysis in their tools. Oh, I forgot to highlight this. Compliance has also emerged as an important network management feature that needs improvement. So keep an eye on the ability of network management tools to help validate compliance. And that's all I have for today, this presentation, so I'll turn it back over to Raleigh briefly. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Seamus. If you have any questions, you can log them now using the Q&A functionality. You should see that in the right-hand column of your screen. Also, this research report is now available. I will send you a link to it in that follow-up email that is going out tomorrow. You can also access it at enterprisemanagement.com/research. Seamus, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the questions. The first one is, what is an example of an IoT device management system?
Hard to say, but given the fact that we were asking this of network management professionals, I think it's probably something that gives them some sort of visibility and ability to edit configuration of various connected devices. So that might be them acquiring a network management tool that can speak specific IoT or Internet of Things network protocols that they have identified as important to them that they can use to interact with certain connected devices. It may also be some sort of network management tool vendor that has remote probes that they can insert into sites that have a lot of IoT devices they can use to sort of proxy insight into certain connected devices. It's kind of a new area as far. I don't really talk to a lot of network management vendors that are doing a lot of IoT management capabilities right now, but I mean some of them are starting to do it, and we're going to see some things emerge. It's really vertically specific, though, very specific to applications and use. So it's hard to say generally what something like that is right now.
Thanks for that clarification, Seamus. The next question is, the adoption rates of hybrid cloud and white box switching seem high. Are those an aberration?
They could be slight aberration. I mean, there's a lot of activity around hybrid cloud there. I mean, I try to define it as clearly as possible for the respondents, so that they knew exactly what they said they were doing. As I mentioned, there's a significant number. I think almost 30% or 28% of the respondents are in the financial industry and the software as a service industry, which are two areas where there might be a lot of hybrid cloud going on, and definitely white box switching going on, which can indicate can explain some of it. But it's definitely something that's going to have to warrant additional research in the future just to really see what's going on here. I also will say that this research found really high, not highlighted in this webinar, but we found significantly high rates of adoption of SDN in this research. We asked them if they were, what stage of activity they were with software-defined networking, and we asked that across 4 categories: software-defined WAN, data center overlays, data center underlays, and campus SDN. And software-defined WAN, 30% of these respondents said they had completed a production deployment, and then slightly less than that said they had completed production deployments of overlays and underlays in the data center. So that's also high. I don't know if we've tapped into a slice of the market that's just more aggressive with new technologies or not, but the fact that we're seeing a lot of SDN activity and a lot of hybrid cloud activity together is pretty interesting. And I recently talked to a client who had done their own survey on SDN adoption that saw similar numbers. I don't know what what kind of survey techniques they use, but they also found high adoption rates. So it seems that we're seeing more aggressive activity than we anticipated. Whether that bears out in future research and whether other analyst firms see similar numbers remains to be seen.
Thanks, Seamus. We have one more question that came in. It is, why are organizations that outsource management struggling with network operations?
This is I'm really interested in doing some additional research on network management outsourcing, the reasons for doing it, the effectiveness of it, how successful they are with it, to really get a better sense of what we're seeing here. I mean, as I mentioned during the presentation, yes, we saw indications that those who are outsourcing network management are less effective at detecting problems and and more likely to be spending more time on putting out fires. Now, is that because they had an ineffective network operations organization before they even outsourced, and did they start outsourcing because they were ineffective, or has outsourcing made them ineffective? I'm not sure. I think we're going to have to ask questions specific to that. And one of the things that I like about these network megatrends projects is we identify things that are happening. Then, in subsequent research, we dig in deeper to figure out why they're happening. So I think future research is going to ask the market, are you outsourcing network management? Why did you do it? Did ineffective network operations lead you to do it? Or, and also, did outsourcing improve or degrade the effectiveness of network operations? Those are things we're going to explore in more detail. So right now all I can do is guess. But I mean, it's probably a mix of both.
Great. Thank you, Seamus. That answers all the questions that we received. I wanted to thank our audience for taking time out of their schedule to join us. You will be receiving a follow-up email from EMA tomorrow. It will include the on-demand playback and a direct link to this new research. Thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.